Good morning.
Hello.
How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Yeah,
This
how are
is,
you?
I'm all right. This is one of those fortuitous bumping intos, I think they're called.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
I'm a furious networker. So who was it I met? Who's the other Bromby?
You actually met my dad.
I did, yeah. We were at the Non-Executive
Yes.
Directors Association. And
Another furious networker.
yeah, absolutely. He was fascinating chatting to him about all the things he's doing in around his preparations for Brexit, I think, wasn't it?
Yeah, I think he's had uh, a serious learning curve of a year with what they've had to do with the banks in
I
the
know,
lead up to
yeah. I don't want to give any.
whatever's
I don't
going
want to give
to
anything
happen.
away, but they had to buy banks somewhere or something and become
I think
registered
there's
in
been
different
all
countries.
sorts of,
Yeah.
yeah. It's
Oh
been,
well.
I think it's quite an unprecedented situation where they're having to kind of do some things that they've not had to do before.
Yeah.
And fast.
Yeah. Right. So, for the benefit of anybody who's watching this who has no idea why we're chatting, why don't we both just say a little bit about what we're up to?
Yeah,
Ladies
definitely. Who's
first.
first?
Ladies
Am I
first.
going first? Okay. All right. So I'm sort of feet into two camps at the moment. I run a company called the YP Collective. We work very much around preparing everyone and anyone for what they need as career skills for the future. So we have a sort of a belief that those skills are not just something that you need to learn at 16 and then figure out what you want to do for the rest of your life.
Mm-hmm.
It's actually a continual learning that you should always be looking to improve and add more strings to your bow, or however you want to call it. And essentially there will be transition points across your career, whether that's entering from learning to earning, or whether that's right at the end and considering retirement, and maybe you want to go into consultancy, or maybe you want to shift your career. Some people re-enter the workforce from family, some people re-enter from redundancy. There are so many transitionary points across your career, and also no one stays in the same job anymore. It's really rare. So why is it that we think that the only way to prepare for your career is right at the beginning when you know nothing, and then apparently that's just you getting on with it from then? And the way the world is shifting so quickly with digital, the way our global economy is shrinking, so many factors involved change the way that we should prepare for work, and continually prepare. So we sit in that space.
Yeah.
I do a lot of things that are learning design. So I work with clients who need a program designed, and quite often I'm sat in a youth sector piece of work. So I will do a lot of work ready programs and that sort of thing, but also I've been involved in a lot of continual professional development type of learning design, program strategy, impact measurements. And I really feel like those three need to sit all together. So it's the UX of exactly what that program would look like, or curriculum would look like, as well as what they learn and how they learn it, and exactly measuring if it's working.
Yeah.
So been doing a lot of that. But
That
you
sounds.
were sharing something interesting earlier this morning, which was a hashtag Young and Proud video.
Mm.
And it's funny because I haven't really looked at those for a while. I started the business in 2014 with actually a slightly different approach to what we do now. And it was much more youth focused, because back then, 2014, I think at the time there was something like just over 1 million 16 to 24-year-olds unemployed.
I remember, yeah.
Yeah, and we had some of the highest rates of youth unemployment, but also on top of that, you had a youth employment unreadiness, and an underemployment. And so people sort of doing jobs with masters that are not utilising their skills and really not getting a return on investment.
No,
But
I
at the
just
same
wanted, so
time,
this is all music to my ears.
yeah.
Because one of the things and I'll tell you a little story about my daughter and her journey into work, which resonated really quite strongly with some of the sentiments expressed in the videos that you've posted and the messaging on your website. And one of the things I told her was, don't let school get in the way of your education. And
Yes.
I've taught in a number of schools. I'm a musician by training, so I'm a music teacher.
Oh, nice.
And one of the things I did when I was frustrated, I was teaching mainly kids around sort of 7 to 11. At about the time when I'm teaching them drums, so I'm the favourite teacher, of course. But one of the boys came to me and said, "I'm really stumped. I don't know what to do in terms of my options, because as you go through school, you drop certain subjects." And so I got him to write down all of his subjects on one side of the page in the order in which he liked them and enjoyed them. And then I said, right, now write them again, but write them now in the order in which you're told you're really good at them. Okay. And he found that 2 or 3 subjects were very close to the top of both lists. And I said, take that list home, talk to your parents, because I can tell you now, if you love it and you're good at it, this is a really good hint about a happy, successful career. And there's a saying, isn't there? When love and skill come together, expect some magic. And so when that happens, it's really great. And I was thrilled to find when I visited the school 6 months later after finishing my stint there, that they'd adopted the system for the whole school.
Have they?
Yeah, and I was absolutely delighted. It was just one of those ideas that came to me, and I thought, well, that would help. But my daughter, I should explain, my stepdaughter was inches away from taking her dorm room at the University of East Anglia to study accountancy. And my wife, her mother, is an accountant, a fellow of the ACCA and an MBA, and pointed out to my stepdaughter that even if she does 3 years at university studying accountancy, she still won't be a fully qualified accountant, because that's a different set of exams and courses. So I said, you need to be sure, sweetheart, that you want to spend the next 3 years studying away from home, not have a job at the end of that period, and have some student debt, and be competing with all the other graduates who want to get into accountancy roles. And then you've got to do your ACCAs. So she was working at the time as an accounts clerk in a local business here in Essex. And I said, go and have a word with them and ask them, because they didn't want to lose her. She was doing quite well as a low cost, someone in the accounts team. Just ask them if they'd be prepared to put you through the ACCA exams. And they said yes. So instead of what she was going to do in the university course, she's part qualified. She's in her early 20s. The car is a Mercedes. The company car is now a Mercedes. She's on an extremely good salary for her age. She's just bought her first small house. And at the same time, friends who did go to university are coming out trying to find the jobs that she was in. So, exactly. And my daughter took similar advice, because she wants to get into digital marketing like her daddy. And she decided she wasn't going to go to university, because none of the vocational careers that require you to go to university were appealing to her. So I said, I recruit all the time, and I headhunt for clients to find marketing assistants and marketing managers. And I can tell you now, the first thing I look at is your experience, and not your qualification.
Exactly.
And if you've just built up an online business that's doing £10,000 a year, that's worth more to any Chartered Institute of Marketing qualification, from my point of view. Yeah. Because it's that practical experience. So I'm a furious networker, as we mentioned earlier, and I was invited to one at BMW in Essex. And my daughter has been on reception at BMW in Surrey for a year. doing as a weekend job. And so she's familiar with all the products, she gets the culture of the company, all of those boxes are ticked, and she's highly thought of there, although it's a very junior role. She does a little bit of marketing in that she manages the CRM system. And I said to her, listen, I rang her the day before. I said, look, I'm thinking of going to this thing. It's £6 each. I'll pay for you. Why don't you drive down? Because she was on holiday by this time, she's only just taken her A-levels. I said, you just never know. There'll be 100 or so people there who run businesses near home where we live. She lives in Surrey, but close to my home in Hockley. And I said, you just never know. Now, you make your own luck, I think. So I rapped on the desk at reception. I said, I wonder, when I got there before she did, just before the networking started, and I said, could I have a quick word with the general manager? And they said, oh, I'm really sorry, he's not here at the moment. BMW were just hosting this networking event, presumably to get people in and stare at their shiny cars.
Yeah.
And they said, but the marketing manager's available. And I met the marketing manager and I said, listen, my daughter's coming down. She works for BMW already. She's on reception and a bit of marketing in Surrey. I wonder if you could spare her 20 minutes just for a chat, because she's really keen to get into digital marketing and she's really keen to stay in BMW. And he turned to me and he said, we have a vacancy for a marketing executive. And I thought, oh my Lord, you know. So he interviewed her that evening. When I rang her and she was 20 minutes away in the car, and I said, you've got an interview. And she said, what?
Oh, that's incredible.
I know, so she's waiting to hear. But the point is that she might get the kind of job that a graduate would die for before she even gets her A-level results into this month.
And here's the thing about that as well is if we think over the last, I would say probably 20 years now, we've put university on a pedestal, and it's been the only option. It hasn't, but in the eyes of, I guess, a societal eye, it's the only option. If you want a successful career, and if you want to be successful, and you want to do well in your life, if for the rest of your life, huge burdening kind of statements, university is your option. And if you don't go to university, the rhetoric has been, it's more because you can't than because you don't want to and you want to do something else.
Yeah, there's a similar...
This is for me. I'm 33, I think, or I might be 32. I continually forget how old I am. But I dropped out halfway through my A-levels. And I just kept saying I didn't want to go to university. I didn't feel academic. I knew I wanted to do other things. At the time, actually, I wanted to go to drama school, really. And it was like talking to a brick wall. I would say, I don't want to go to university. And it was either, well, what are you going to do then? As if there was no other option. Or, oh, why don't you just do drama at uni? And it's like, why? Why is this the only option? And it drove me mad. 16, angsty and frustrated.
Yeah.
And I was just, I've been on that.
There is another...
fury.
Yeah, there's another... parallel with my background, because my background was in music. I trained at the Guildhall School of Music.
Right, yeah.
As a percussionist. And the general sense then, and it's still the case to a certain extent, is that if you can't play, you teach, and if you can't teach, you administrate in the music world. I've done really quite well out of all three, thank you very much, over the years. But
There's the same in theatre.
Yeah, sorry?
It's the same in theatre. If you can't get into drama school, then you teach. And it's like,
and if you can't teach, you're a stage manager.
There is a kind of line of snobbery that goes through careers guidance, actually. That is sort of those types of communications. Like, if you can't do this, that's what you end up doing. This whole ending up doing this.
Yeah.
Actually, there is a real excitement in the ending up.
Yeah,
which I'm sure you're...
Let me just explain why I was really interested when we got in touch through your dad, because I should explain my background. I went from music I set up an entertainment agency, which became an event company, which I sold, And then in 1993, which is probably before you were born.
Oh no.
Oh no. Okay. I sent my first email message. I waited a week for a reply, which was hilarious when you think about it. And I remember the day I saw the web in colour for the first time. And I decided, right, there's something in this. And I was in the percussion section of the City of Birmingham Symphony Orchestra at the time. And I went to the orchestra and said, would you like a website? And they said, what? You know, this is in 1994. You know, I said, well, I can tell you now that the London Symphony Orchestra are planning one, and if we're quick, we can beat them to it. And you do that in Birmingham, and they say, yes, let's do it. You know, because they love beating London in Birmingham. I designed the website. It was a very steep learning curve for all of us. It was, I mean, in those days, it was desktop publishing down the phone. I mean, it wasn't extremely complicated. But that website got reviewed in an early edition of Net User magazine in 1996. And we got 4 stars out of 5 for it. And Lloyds Bank's first website only got 2 stars.
Wow.
And I thought, right, okay, perhaps I ought to set up a web design agency, which I did in 1995. And I was still doing the entertainment agency stuff as well, sort of trying to do this effectively. That grew to a team of 10, doing mainly work for music and arts clients because of my background. But we also did a bit of work for Goldman Sachs in the late 90s, and it was a crazy ride. And we rebranded that in 2004 to the Escape Committee because we were coming up against agencies called Green Cathedral and Red Snapper, and so we needed a trendier name than Web Project. Sorry, the dog's outside.
That's all right.
And I sold that in 2008, just in time for the recession to hit in. And then I went and started working at other agencies in senior roles at other agencies. But the reason, so jump ahead, and I've been freelancing now as a marketing consultant and a non-executive director, hence meeting your dad. I'm going to shut this window, hold on. Damn dog. And so, but what I've done more recently, and this is why it's exciting at the moment, is I'm in the process of setting up a new agency, which I don't know if I mentioned it in the emails, but there is an awful lot of crossover. Chuffed, yes, C-H-U-F-D.
Yes.
Chuffed is going to be a hybrid between a creative design and marketing agency on the one hand, a training academy on the other hand, and a social enterprise on the third. In that, all the work's going to be done by student, graduate and freelance writers and designers, and potentially developers, mentored and directed through that commercial work by my business partners and myself. And between us, we have 90 years of experience. So what we're effectively doing is bridging the gap between a non-commercially minded graphic artist and the commercial imperative of the need for the flyer to be communicative. So that's what we're doing. And it struck me, and I've already had conversations with organizations locally, because it's the sort of thing that they like to fund, because it's the fees will be generally lower than going to a London creative agency. The audience is younger. And so some of the people who posted videos on your YouTube channel, I know are in that kind of area, which was really exciting to those. So what I wanted to explore, and it may be that it's another conversation, but I think some of what we need to build that network. We've got a certain number of people already in mind, but we need to partner with organizations who can introduce us to young, talented, hungry. They don't need to be young. They need to be young to the discipline. They don't need to be young in age. You know, so by the same token, if somebody has decided to take a career break and has suddenly realized they're an amazing graphic designer and is all over Photoshop and Illustrator, then we want to hear from you as well. It's not a youth thing. It's anybody who's new to those disciplines.
I like that you called it young to the discipline, actually. I think there's a really nice thing you caught there where it's paying attention to this continual learning and continual curiosity that you need throughout your career. And actually that should happen at any age. And there's this whole fear of getting older, or, you know, and this, which obviously has been around for a long time and for all sorts of reasons. But actually this whole idea that the older you get, the more irrelevant you get is such crap. Excuse my French. But it's just not the way we should be viewing it, because there are, you know, because as you say, experience talks huge amounts. But also we've got a whole cohort of people who are digitally native, who really understand it. They've just grown up into it, and it's just part of their fabric. I realised the other day that my children write a lot more than I ever did. They're doing it on devices rather than in Excel books. Well, funnily enough, there's a linguist called David Crystal, and this was some time ago when texting became a big thing, and there was this whole thing, and this is sort of why we did the videos, actually, because there's a real youth bashing that has actually, frankly, has been going on since the Babylonian times, but you know, it's damaging, and I hate it. This easy ability to just put down the youngest and freshest generation that should be bringing that energy to our own society, and we should be ready for their change.
Absolutely. 100 years ago,
you're trying to press them down.
100 years ago, and I know that, you know, physically men are at their peak at the age of 19, and we know that. But 100 years ago, when life expectancy in East London was 48, the teenagers had to do it. You know, what seems to have happened is over the years, as life expectancy has extended, and I gather, by the way, that the first person to reach 150 years old has already been born. That's a scary thought.
Well, that's something to think about.
But there are opportunities at both ends of that spectrum, because I don't expect to retire in the traditional sense. I've got to the stage in my career where what I've learned and sharing that is more valuable than me doing the work. And that's why I'm a guest lecturer at Greenwich and Bournemouth universities on digital marketing. So I've set up my own kind of mentoring tool, a informal mentoring program, helping graduates find their way into that process. But there is by overlooking people who are in the autumn of their lives, we are missing out on tapping into the experience that they have. And by not respecting and harnessing the enthusiasm, energy and creativity of people in the spring of their lives, we're missing out on all of that. What we seem to have is the wrong people are doing it all. You know, we're missing that, and we're missing that, and I'm guilty of this. I'm in the middle at the moment.
But there's also a disconnect between groups and a segmentation where these groups are all working in silo, and then somehow, you know, you can't be a 20-something and work alongside a 50-something. That's just ridiculous. You know, and I think it's interesting because, you know, you have this was the #Young and Proud videos that we started off with, because I thought, well, we've got over 1 million young people out of work. They've been hard sold university since practically the day they were born. So they've gone to university, they've come out, they've not got a job, they're either under or unemployed, and then they're being called snowflakes. Then they're being told they eat too much avocado and that's why they can't get on the property ladder. And then they're being told that they've got, you know, the front page of various rubbish newspapers are saying that they've got no manners, that they're ungrateful, that they're stupid, that they're lazy, that they can't be bothered, that they feel entitled. These are all like things that are said about a cohort we should be uplifting, because frankly we need them to bring our economy back, particularly like you say in reference to 2008. You've got a cohort of young people that have disappeared, and I wrote an article that I'm yet to publish actually, I talked about the invisible needs. These sort of not in employment educational training, and you've got usually funding will go between 16 and 25, sometimes up to 30. But think about it, you've got a cohort who graduated in 2008 into a barren landscape and have been set back ever since, and for the last 10 years have probably spent several years being unemployed, several years being underemployed, and have continually been on the back foot financially and in their career ever since. And some of those people are now my age. I actually went to university in the end because there was genuinely nothing I could do. I was getting stopped at applications online. Are you a graduate? And I couldn't say yes, and it said, sorry, you can't apply. And it got to the point where I could not physically move forward in my career and do jobs I knew I could do on the back of my hand, unless I had a bit of paper to say I got drunk for 3 years. Fine, I went and did it. I mean, obviously I didn't get drunk for 3 years, but let's be honest, we all know what the university experience is meant to be, which is also part of the sell, which is utterly ridiculous, but that's a different rant entirely. But I went, and I graduated in 2010, and I am very, very lucky. You met my dad. He instilled a networking culture in me from probably around 9. Mainly because I would go to see him on weekends, and he'd have to go to a networking event, and he'd bring me along. And sometimes he'd say, well, do you mind if I quickly go and speak to so-and-so? And I go, okay. And I'd be in my school uniform with my little name badge, and walking around eating all the free bagels. And then somebody would come up to me and go, oh, who are you? And I'd be like, hiya, I'd be like 13. Oh, I'm thinking about what I'm going to do for my GCSEs. And I'd tell them all about my GCSEs, and I'd network. and he's instilled that in me. And I'm very lucky because by the time I graduated, and also because I dropped out, I spent 5 years working. So my CV was full. I'm a musician as well, actually. So I taught piano. And so I did that for 3 years, accidentally started a business. And then also scooped ice cream, scrubbed toilets, pulled pints, waited tables, handed out flyers, you name it, I did it. But I had a lot of work experience and a lot of contacts by the time I graduated. And I was a bit older. A lot of people I knew who graduated between 2008 and 2010 have been on the back foot ever since. And now they are no longer categorized as that group of people that need help from funding organizations that recognize them as needs. And they are that lost generation from the 2008 and no one knows.
And making it, and it gets worse when you look ahead, because I gather that my generation is the first generation, although my generation is the last generation to retire with more money than your parents.
Yes.
Because
my
parents paid off their mortgage. And there was an inheritance. I'm not going to pay mine off. So I'm sorry, kids, we're spending it.
Yeah, exactly. And then my generation are the first who are in their 30s, often still living with their parents. Because they need to try and get a foothold somewhere, somehow, because they are massively qualified. And see, a lot of people I graduated with went in and thought, oh my God, look at the state of this. There's an average of 120 people applying for one single job before it's advertised. Okay, tell you what I'll do. I'll get a master's, so I've got something, an edge against other people. But do you know what happened? Everyone went and got a master's.
And you're still, and you're a further 2 years behind. Yeah,
exactly. And then the apprenticeship levy came in. But if you've got a degree already and you've got a master's in some sense, or in some instances, you couldn't go and get an apprenticeship because you've already got the qualification and you are overqualified. So this whole I'm telling you, there is an entire cohort of young people, and they're not so young anymore, who are continually trying to get some form of foothold and get ahead of themselves instead of this biting on the ankles, essentially feeling like they're on an exercise bike and not going it. They're not on a bike, they're just cycling on the spot.
Yeah, I've never seen, that's really interesting. I'm fascinated by the way you sort of position that, and it really hadn't occurred to me. But what we're also seeing is the concept of portfolio careers. I consider mine to be a portfolio career. On Monday morning, I might be helping a biotechnology company in Cambridge sell more antibodies, monoclonal antibodies. On Tuesday, I might be helping advise a chain of fish and chip shops on how to attract more customers using digital channels. On Wednesday, I might be facilitating a digital innovation day at somewhere. Thursday, I might be working on setting up this new agency, and then Friday, it could be in music, or I'm advising the board at a company that sells rivets.
How much more interesting is that week in the life of you, right? And I'm so glad we now have not just a name for it, but a recognised and aspired name for something like this. A portfolio career is something I've done ever since I sort of fell out the end of my high school with a bit of a sulk on.
Yeah, but I think the trick though, the trick is so this is another thought that we might develop further, is that how do you turn the concept of a portfolio career into something, well, you may tell me you're doing this now, but how do you take the concept of a portfolio career being a perfectly acceptable career choice and educate people for that? Okay,
that's what we do.
Excellent. so
that's So the thing. So what we used to do when I started the company back in 2012, it was very much around young people, getting young people into work, helping that transition from learning to earning, helping businesses recruit better. And in the same breath, deal with their diversity issues, deal with their talent issues, and bring more live, fresh young people into their business to future-proof them. And then I took a bit of a break for about 18 months and got myself a proper job. The second, and I think now probably the last time I'll ever do that. I keep occasionally fitting back and getting the pressure to go and get this proper job stuff. I'm just not going to do it anymore. and then I restarted the company again, or it was still running, but I sort of pushed it forward as of this time last year. And New Money YP Collective is much more around careers advice for all, which is sort of what I began speaking about at the beginning. And we are developing a universal career curriculum. Universal being, I'm a linguist graduate, so I was a massive. I mean, it's funny. I ended up in university. I actually really loved my degree. It wouldn't have been what I chose to do, but it is what it is, and it's how it works. But I was fascinated by the idea of universal grammar by Chomsky, that there is a global grammar that we all use as human beings. And I thought, well, I bet that can be relensed, and how does this work in other things? And I'm working on at the moment, and we're in development, and writing a career curriculum for all, a universal career curriculum. And I'm speaking to a couple of people of the space travel sort of direction to look at attributes and the qualities of an astronaut and what they need as a human being to do what they do, which is quite possibly the most future-facing, the most alien, the most untapped territory type of career and industry. And so in some ways, sort of the unreachable career. What are the, if you were to compartmentalize it into human qualities, what do you need to be an astronaut? And it's going to, essentially, we're creating the astronaut's guide to the future of work. We're not creating astronauts. This is not a careers advice to become an astronaut. It's not like that at all.
That's how astronauts are not portfolio careerists, are they really?
No, exactly. they have a whole plethora of attributes that are completely transferable. And if we're going to go with, and if we're really going to live by this thing that we've talked about for a long time of transferable skills, but not really lived by, we've said it, but we've not actually implemented it. There are plenty of HR and talent acquisition teams out there that harp on about transferable skills, but seem to be completely unable to recruit transferable skills.
One of the things that this jives nicely with, I don't know if you've read any Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad Poor Dad.
No.
Oh, well, you absolutely. I wish I'd read it when I was your age. And this jives nicely with that, because the premise of Robert Kiyosaki's book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, is that we all fall into one of four quadrants. We're either employed, in which case we work January, February and March for the government, because that's the way you pay your tax. It's horrible when you think you're going to work the whole of January, February and March for the government. We're either self-employed, which gives us somewhat more freedom and decision-making about when and where we work, but you're still paying tax. It's not a tax avoidance scheme, it's just a financial freedom scheme. And in the other quadrant, you have business owners, because if you own a business, whether you work in it or on it or just own it, it's generally people who work in it in some respect. The opportunities to reinvest tax that you would have otherwise paid as a self-employed person or an employed person are much greater. And there is, of course, that concept of limited liability, so you can take a few more risks and it won't affect you personally. And then the final quadrant is an investor. So on one hand, you've got employees, self-employed, business owners, and investors. And the book teaches you how to go from here to here. One of the things that he mentions in the book is a real measure of your financial freedom and independence is not how much you earn or how much you've got in the bank. It's how long you could last if you stop working. Okay. And for him, the two main vehicles for investment are property and businesses and shares. So, but what was really impressive in the way that he structured it, and it's a fascinating read. There is also a board game which I played with my children to teach them what looks like a good investment.
Oh wow!
Fantastic! It's a game. It's really clever.
Great idea.
Yeah, but you can be in more than one box at any given time. So there have been times when I've been in all four. And so, but this concept of a more flexible approach to how you spend your time, I think is just growing and growing. But one of the things I've often wondered is, we've got 9 to 5, 5 days a week. Who on earth decided that every single, or most jobs need to be full-time and fit those hours? I mean, it's just ridiculous, Well,
it's there's a lot of interesting commentary about that, because that's based on a very, very old way of working that followed either seasons or harvest times or factories.
Or daylight, yeah.
Daylight, well, exactly, it's the season, the harvest.
Yeah.
It's going through, and then there's also some interesting reads, and it's a slightly left field, you have to, but I read that there is a hormonal cycle in men, where the peak in testosterone starts at 9, builds, and then comes back down again, is at its lowest at about 6.
Right.
And women haven't been so much of an active role in establishing work culture over history. It's interesting that it's also following where the energy lies in most of the workforce.
Well, I don't know about you, but I'm at my best between 6 and 8 a.m. and 10 p.m. and 1 a.m.
It's so funny, isn't it? And I think you're right, really.
I could fall asleep standing up at 11 a.m. and 4 p.m. generally. I mean, that's just, I have to work around that. Obviously, if I'm doing a 1 day,
you have to accommodate it to a degree.
Work through it.
I totally agree. I'm a night owl, so I'm not somebody. If I've got something early, I really have to really work at getting myself active at that time.
Yeah.
But if it was completely up to me, I'd probably start work at about 2 and then probably work up until midnight.
Well,
because
I run. Yeah, so there's also the concept of 5 to 9, which I love, rather than 9 to 5, because I actually advise people who have what you might call a side hustle, and they're increasingly.
Yeah, I love a side hustle.
They're increasingly prevalent. I mean, millions of people in the US are doing it and supplementing their income.
Well, there's a lot of companies that are supporting their workforce to have it as well. Google's a classic example.
That's great. I think that's fantastic. So you get home and you do a couple of hours on it. I run a retail outlet called Luster Lingerie, which we bought. My wife and I decided we wanted a business we could work on together, and that became available. I think we paid £6,000 for it. But at its peak, it was selling £2,000 worth of lingerie every month. So it's by a long, long way paid for itself, and that's quite a return on investment if you're prepared to put the effort in, and it doesn't need much. It's all drop ship, so you never see any products, you never have any premises, you don't have any staff. You keep 30% of the money, and the manufacturer sends the product straight to the customer. It's great. Obviously, Amazon is the big competition, but if you can bolt on some great customer service and bundle things in a unique manner, it's a viable business. Now, if somebody came to me having done that, I'd say, right, yes, you've been through the process. You must have addressed the fundamentals of business strategy if you've managed to make that a success. But do you think, those are increasingly popular, and I think we'll see more and more and more of that. I'm conscious of time, absolutely. There's certainly going to be a follow-up. So
I feel like we've only scratched the surface on
there is somebody I'd like to introduce you to who has a podcast called Better Conversations.
Oh, brilliant.
And I think she would be fascinated to meet you and interview you. And I think what I'll do is I'll follow up with an email, if that's all right.
Yeah, definitely.
Because I think it would be great to somehow leverage your network for the Chuffed development.
I think that would be really great. And I also, I've done a lot of work with schools and with colleges. I live in East London, and the East London boroughs of Hackney, Tower Hamlets and Newham are particularly, have been Sadiq Khan's tech talent pipeline boroughs to test on.
Okay.
So there's been a lot of really interesting work that's gone on that I've ended up being really fortunate to be a part of.
Well, the ideal introductions for us on that are on the faculty are people who are in the art and design, stream, media and business. Those are the people that we really want to tap into. And
there's a pseudo agency in New City College, Hackney, called Blue Orange, and they take on professional briefs. And then as part of their learning, they respond to it. Now, they did something as part of a program I was part of, which was funded by the European Social Fund. And they did an okay job, but I would like to go in there, preferably in a partnership with something like what you're creating, and go, right, how can we ensure that your quality of work and your delivery and your professional elements are also fine-tuned. Streamline you to be ready for work, because it's got the shell, they've got a space, the space is amazing, they've got tech, they've got all of this, it's all been funded by European Social Fund. But what they don't have is they are not being taught well enough to respond to briefs, to be client-facing, and to understand how to take their ideas and translate them into a client's what the client wants.
Yeah.
and it's the type of small professional skills they're lacking.
Well,
So
that would be
if you
perfect.
look up blue orange, yeah.
Yeah, I shall have a look. Yeah, that sounds great. And we should perhaps try and find other people, other organisations who might need that. Louise, this has been fantastic.
Yeah.
Thank you. I'm glad I bumped into your dad a few weeks ago and he put us in touch.
He tends to get around.
All right, well, to be continued.
Yes, definitely. Mark, thank you so much. It's been really nice chatting to you.
Okay, thanks, Louise. Bye.
Bye-bye.